Hi, this is Chuck Gallagher, and if we haven't gone down the rabbit holes deep enough, we're getting ready to go deeper. My guest is Valda Ford. Valda is a registered nurse. She has multiple master's degrees, does lots and lots of education related to sexual health. Today we're talking about men's health, especially prostate health.
Right. Well, Chuck, I know we've talked about your procedure so far.
Sure.
You had the surgery. We're talking about things to worry about. We're talking about incontinence and erectile dysfunction. Now, your doctor gave you some interesting information about what he was doing, nerve sparing. Tell us about that.
Okay, so in order, now again, I'm probably going to say the wrong terminology, so you can correct us as we go, but in order for a man to have an erection, the signal comes from the brain, down the spinal cord, across a series of nerves, which happen to lay right on top of the prostate gland, into the penis.
Yes.
And the doctor said to me, he said, now, think of your prostate like a balloon. Take a balloon and inflate the balloon, and a nice little round balloon. Now, that's obviously bigger than a real prostate, but let's just use it as the example. And the nerves are silly string. Just take a can of silly string and squirt it all over it. And so he said, your nerves for 47 years have sat on top of this thing in your body, and they work.
Yeah.
They transmit information. He said, my job is to remove the prostate, which is the air inside the balloon, without removing the skin of the prostate. That's the balloon, the mylar, or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is.
Myelin.
Yeah. And when that happens, functionally think about, here the silly string is sat, and all of a sudden you let the air out of the balloon and it goes like that. And the nerves are like, oh crap, something just happened. What are we doing? He said, it's like taking a cat, putting them in a bathtub. He said, if you want to ever see anything, walk on water. Put a cat in a bathtub, watch what happens. That cat will walk itself right on out of there. So he said, once this happens, it doesn't mean the nerves are destroyed. It means, however, that they are so disturbed, it will take time for them to recover. And remember, their function is to transmit this information so that you will be sexually functional again.
Well, the thing is that anytime you're working in and around the nerves, there's a chance you can stretch them. There's a chance that, as you say, they've gone from this configuration to now this configuration. They're like, what are you laying on me? It's like your kid brother. You're touching me. I don't know what to do.
Great, yeah.
So what you have to do anytime there is injury to the nerve or trauma or just medications, you have to get to the point that you wait for them to come back to their normal function. Sometimes they don't come completely back, but there's a new school of thought now that we used to think once a nerve is damaged or sleep or whatever the case would be, that it's lost, but that's not true anymore. We know that just having the expectation that it will work, sending to your brain, let your mind tell your brain, I want to make this work, and then your body will start to get back there, whether it's regeneration or whether it's waking up, whether it's no longer stretched. You have the capacity to have full sexual function after you have a prostate removed.
You know, Valda, there's two things that you said, and it really strikes me. One, my doctor said to me, he said, okay, your nerves have undergone some stress and trauma. And he said, so they have to be, as you put it, reawakened to what their function is. Now, some people listening to this are probably going to find perhaps this a bit offensive. I tell you, we're going down rabbit holes. But my doctor said to me, he said, look, he said, you're going to have to rehab yourself. He said, you cannot sit there and assume you're going to be reasonably normally sexually active if you're not attempting to be sexually active.
Right.
He said, if I sent you to an orthopedic surgeon to have your knee replaced, what would be the first thing to happen after surgery? I said, well, you go to rehab. Exactly. He said, you got to go to rehab. And he said, do not expect your wife to be your rehab agent. because your wife has been your romantic partner.
Right.
She ain't your rehab agent. You got to do rehab. So he said, son, I'm going to tell you best I can. You might need to take matters into your own hands.
Literally.
Literally. And he said, if masturbation is what it takes, you need to do whatever it takes, because if you aren't active, then there is also the possibility you won't be active.
Exactly.
And he said, you don't want to do that. So he said, just be aware, you're going to have to focus more attention on regaining that sexual activity.
Well, the other thing is that women tell me, I don't know what to do.
Right.
I don't know if being my sexy self is a problem. If I'm walking around in a negligee and my husband is someone who is not at that point where he's functional, is that creating mental stress for him? So then, you know, with sex, once anxiety and all that gets in, nothing's going to happen anyway. What many men have said to me is the challenge is when they are ready, and most of them have not had the luxury of having someone who was as much into your whole health as the doctor you're telling me about.
Sure.
So they're just trying to figure it out, and they're hoping for the best. And there are guys who will tell me that, okay, it's been 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, and all of a sudden I wake up with a woody, and then they don't know what to do. They don't know if they should wake their wife up or if they should wait until later. And then what if it doesn't come back later? So I talk to couples to say, the thing that you can do best of all is to be ready for each other when the moment happens. If you're a wife who's been thinking, well, it's been a long time, maybe it's going to be a long time, I've tried to say to myself, I love this man, I don't care whether he can have sex. If he wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you got to go to work in 2 more hours, get ready. Do whatever needs to happen, because you'll be encouraging him instead of discouraging him, because again, we don't want the mental games to get in the way of the physical reawakening.
Right. And the mental games they're significant.
They are.
And one of the things we'll talk about in another segment are those sexual aids. And when I refer to sexual aids, I'm talking about Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, injections, pumps, etc., things that can help with that process. But it is mentally draining on a man. You know this from your medical background. It is mentally draining on a man to think, well, I'm not the man I used to be.
Right.
The truth is, I've yet to run across a man. Now, I'm sure there are those out there, and yay for those that are there, but I've yet to run across a man that says, I am physically exactly the same as I was before I had whatever my treatment was for prostate cancer.
Right.
You'll be different.
Yeah.
You will be different.
I've run across those who've said, while I'm not physically the exact same, I'm actually a better lover because I took the time to figure out what works for me, what works for my partner, and how the two of us can work together to have the best possible sexual experience, even though it's different. Because sometimes different is better. Because there are women who will say to me that the guy was always someone who the first thing he wanted to do was enter and penetrate and pound. Penetrate and pound, penetrate and pound. No thought at all about what was going on with her. But now, here's a guy who's figured out, well, I like it when this happens, or I like it if she masturbates me in order to get me there, because that's just a whole other set of togetherness and intimacy, and they may have a better overall sexual experience, and if people can think about it that way, sometimes it takes some of the fear out of it.
Absolutely. So we'll talk about many of the other issues that relate to sex, especially following prostate cancer, and some of the things you can expect, because some things are unusual.
Right.
The one thing that everybody says that's had surgery is, nobody told me that there was no ejaculation following. And it was like, oh, wow, I didn't know as a guy that I could have an orgasm with no ejaculate.
Right.
Well, the orgasm happens in the center of the frontal lobe of your brain, not where you think it happens because of what we have been conditioned to feel. So is it possible? Absolutely. And we will go down that rabbit hole in more detail. My name is Chuck Gallagher. This is Val DeFord, and we're talking about men's health and prostate issues.